Hey guys, in today's video, we're going to compare Jay Cutler from 2013 versus Phil Heath from 2020. You guys had Phil Heath from 2020 winning the last comparison, which means that these two men will be battling out for the title of the worst of the best. I do believe that Jay Cutler firmly defeated Ronnie Coleman's '07 version. However, Phil versus Dorian was a much harder decision to make because I think that both men were very comparable in terms of conditioning and just overall development in those years. But you guys chose in the poll for Phil Heath's 2020 version to win. So Jay Cutler 2013 versus Phil Heath will be your two finalists to compete for this title. The front double bicep pose is the first pose we will run through today, and neither man really impresses me here all too much. Now, Jay Cutler definitely has the better flow here. I mean, his lats flare out really well. He has very wide clavicles, and his arms do not look all too bad, yet they are very downsized from years prior. Now, his legs are very soft, and that softness is very evident everywhere. I mean, his midsection looks soft, legs soft, upper body is kind of soft as well. Now, if we look at Phil Heath is dry and conditioned. He has very separated legs and an upper body that is even more separated, but his midsection throws off this whole physique. And he's also narrow, and he's not holding this pose in a correct manner, you could say, which is really not doing him any favors here. But I mean, Phil Heath does have better arms, is in better conditioning, and definitely has the upper hand in the leg department. So I would definitely give Phil Heath this first pose. But I will say that I do prefer Jay Cutler in this front double bicep shot. Jay Cutler presents himself better in the front lat spread than he presented himself in the front double bicep. He looks a lot more conditioned in the leg department. Specifically, his quads look to be a little bit more cut and separated, but Phil Heath is taking him to school in the calf department. Now, the midsections, Jay Cutler is winning this one very easily in the midsection. Although Phil Heath seems to be more dry in the midsection, I think Jay Cutler's abdominal region and just midsection in general looks a lot more aesthetically pleasing, and he creates a better V-taper. Now, the lats are more filled out for Jay Cutler as well. Phil Heath's lats really aren't that good here, and he's very narrow too, so his big arms overpower his lats in this shot. But his arms are huge. They are huge and they are conditioned and cut everywhere. His forearms are ginormous. I mean, his chest is full as well. Striations popping everywhere. Not to mention, I mean, Phil Heath is winning in the legs as well. But, the lack of width in the clavicles and a worse midsection and overall, also bad lats in this pose and bad posing is going to lose Phil Heath this shot, and it's probably going to win Jay Cutler a point here. The side chest pose really exposes Jay Cutler's lack of conditioning from the side, and then specifically in the leg. I mean, you guys can clearly see that Jay Cutler lacks the tie-ins that Phil Heath has in his legs, and Phil Heath's legs look overall more grainy and, conditioned. Now, if we look at the arms, it's a big, difference here. If we look at Phil Heath's arm, you can clearly see the separation between the brachialis and the forearm and the tricep and the bicep. Whereas for, Jay Cutler, it's a little bit washed out here, but I will give Jay Cutler credit. His far pec and his shoulders are really hard and grainy here. But I don't think that's enough to do, battle against this really good looking Phil Heath. I mean, Phil Heath has huge arms, a really full and striated chest, great shoulders, and pretty good legs too. And not to forget, but Phil Heath also has a decent looking midsection here. So I'm going to give Phil Heath the point in the side chest. Now, in the side tricep, Jay Cutler is definitely doing battle against Phil Heath. While Jay Cutler's leg looked a little bad in the last shot, you can see it kind of came to life once again. I mean, look at the separation now. It's clearly evident. But so did Phil Heath's side leg. I mean, it looks great here. It looks very good, and you can really see the glutes kind of peeking in there too. Now, I think that Jay Cutler's arm really isn't as good as it used to be, and that's clearly seen here. I mean, the tricep, this used to be his best shot back in the day, in my opinion, one of his best shots, if not. And, his tricep looks good here, but his arm is definitely downsized. And in comparison, Phil Heath's arm is just massive. I mean, his forearm, bicep, tricep, I mean, the tricep itself is striated everywhere, shoulders for days. I mean, look at that shoulder. It's ridiculous. And, Jay Cutler's chest looks good here, but Phil Heath's chest definitely looks better. Phil Heath definitely loses the midsection, though. You can kind of see it's a little distended here, too, but he's hitting it really well, Phil Heath. I mean, he's hitting the shot very, very well. I mean, Jay Cutler, if he had a little bit more mass everywhere, he would definitely be defeating Phil Heath in this shot. But since he doesn't have the mass everywhere, I think that I'm going to give this shot to Phil Heath because he has the conditioning, he has the advantage in the tricep, and although he's losing in the midsection and the ab development, I mean, his chest, everything looks so much more full. And I think that Jay Cutler just can't defeat a really good looking Phil Heath. I mean, okay, guys, in this back shot here, the rear lat spread, I don't even think this is a fair comparison. While Jay Cutler may be doing, a little bit of battle in the hamstring department and maybe just the back leg in general, except for the glutes, he's losing in the calves. I mean, actually, he's not doing too badly in the calves, but he's losing in the back flat out. I mean, I'll tell you guys the truth. He's losing in the back. He's missing his back. It's just gone. And while, Phil Heath's 2020 back wasn't the best of all time, it's still very dense. It isn't as wide as before, but it's dense and it's grainy and conditioned, and it has that 3D effect to it. And Phil Heath really isn't missing anything. Once we take that midsection out of the equation, I mean, he looks phenomenal, guys. He really does. And Jay Cutler just doesn't have the thickness or, width that he once had, really just crumbling apart from the back. So this is a very, very easy rear lat spread win for Phil Heath. Wow. So, I mean, in the rear double bicep pose, Jay Cutler is really reminding me of Big Ramy from the 2022 Mr. Olympia with that completely missing lower back. But, I mean, Jay Cutler's back definitely looks a lot more dense here and a lot more conditioned than it did before. And the lack of a lower back is a lot less noticeable in this shot. But, I mean, look at Phil Heath, guys. His arms are ridiculously conditioned, shoulders massive. Jay Cutler is doing a pretty good job at matching Phil Heath in the arm department, in my opinion. But I mean, Jay Cutler cannot match Phil Heath in the lower back region, which is just a 3D bubbly turtle shell thing for Phil Heath. Looks ridiculous. I mean, it looks crazy. And the glutes look to be in better condition for Phil Heath, and so do the hamstrings. But Jay Cutler's got some good hamstrings too. And, I mean, I think Phil Heath is definitely taking this pose, but Jay Cutler looks a little bit better than he did before. So I'm going to give Phil Heath this shot. But this one's definitely a bit closer than the rear lat spread. I think that Jay Cutler can definitely make up some ground here in the abs and thigh shot. I mean, his thighs and specifically his quads look very good here, striated to a T. They aren't as big as they once were, but that's not a problem when I see those striations, and they look very good. I will say, though, that Phil Heath is definitely matching Jay Cutler in the quad department, if not destroying him. Not destroying, beating him. Meant to say beating. He might be beating Jay Cutler in the quad department just because of how big and separated his legs are. I definitely think that Phil Heath is in better conditioning in the, downstairs apartment. But I mean, Phil Heath just cannot touch. No one can beat, Jay Cutler in the abs here, especially Phil Heath. I mean, Phil Heath's midsection is all sorts of terrible trouble. I mean, it is protruding in all different directions. His abdominal, development genetically is just not aesthetic to begin with. So when he has this, distension, it just doesn't look good at all. Now, Jay Cutler has some pretty good abs here. Definitely a bit melted in comparison to his other years, but that's fine. They look better than Phil Heath's, and neither man is really creating a good V taper. Both men are kind of rectangular. But I'm going to give this one to Jay Cutler because of the midsection and because he's not really losing all too badly in the leg department to Heath. The most muscular shot for both men is a, rather okay pose, but I will say that Phil Heath looks a lot better than Jay Cutler here. But Jay Cutler's legs and just overall body has come to life by the end of this comparison. But I'm afraid it's a little too late for Jay Cutler because Phil Heath's arms are much better than Jay's. Phil Heath's chest is much more full. I mean, look at that. Look at the shoulders difference. I mean, it is ridiculous. Phil Heath, you can't really see his midsection, so he's hiding his, weakest point. And Jay Cutler's midsection looks really good here. But if we look at the quads, I mean, Jay Cutler's legs, they look good here. They're striated, the quads, but Phil Heath's are just better separated and are bigger and are grainier and drier. And not to mention, I mean, his calves once again are much better. I mean, Phil Heath is very reminiscent of a prime time Phil Heath here. I mean, he looks great. So I'm going to give this shot easily to Phil Heath, but Jay Cutler does not look all too bad. All right, so now this comparison is over, and I can tell you who won which poses, or you guys can look at the screen and follow along. So I had Jay Cutler winning the front lat spread and the abs and thigh shot, which is only two poses. Now I had Phil Heath winning every other pose, the front double bicep, side chest, side tricep, rear lat, rear double bicep, and the most muscular, which means that Phil Heath won this comparison with a score of 6-2, with obviously Phil Heath winning and becoming the best, worst of the best bodybuilder. I definitely do believe that Phil Heath had less, lacking body parts than Jay Cutler. And he definitely had the most overall complete physique out of all four of the men that I covered in this Worst of the Best series. I mean, he didn't really have any lagging body parts, definitely downsized from past years, but his only, downside was his midsection. And I think if he fixed that, he could have placed a bit higher and potentially won the 2020 Mr. Olympia. But I guess we'll never know. So that about does it for this video. If you guys liked, please consider liking and subscribing. It means a lot to me like always. And comment down below if you guys have any future video ideas or if you have anything else you'd like to say. Once again, thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next video. Have a good night.